eligible Latino voters shows Vice President Kamala Harris with a 27-point lead over former President Donald Trump among people in that demographic, but still underperforming Democrats compared to past presidential elections. The poll conducted by BSP Research and commissioned by Unidos US, the largest Latino nonprofit advocacy organization in the country. Joining us now with an exclusive early look at the details of that poll, NBC News correspondent, anchor of NBC News Daily, Morgan Radford. Morgan, good morning. What more did you learn?
Hey there, guys. Good morning. So a lot of new takeaways this morning, especially since this is the first Latino voter poll this big since Vice President Kamala Harris secured her party's nomination. But first, some context. That political arm of the organization, Unidos US, is Unidos US Action Fund, and they have endorsed the Biden-Harris ticket in May and endorsed Harris's candidacy back in July. Now, the president and founding partner of BSP Research is Matt Barreto, who previously worked for the Biden campaign in 2020, which is to say that even though this BSP poll mainly focuses on Democratic polling, the results are consistent with other Latino voter polls. So let's go ahead and get right into it. Starting with that head-to-head matchup, Harris has a 27-point lead, if you look here, nationwide compared to Biden's hypothetical 18-point lead last November. So that's something the Harris campaign might point to as momentum. But if you actually compare it to the 2020 exit polls, that margin is still smaller than the 33-point lead Biden had among Latinos when he won, and it's also a smaller lead than both Clinton and Obama had in 2016 and 2012, respectively. But here, check this out. Another interesting thing that we're finding out just for the first time, J.D. Vance, as Trump's running mate, may actually be hurting him with Latino voters nationally. In fact, the former president does actually a few points worse with Vance on the ticket than he would if he were just by himself. But for Harris, on the other hand, the addition of Tim Walz is slightly positive, but the effect is more or less the same. Both of those shifts there are within the margin of error. But the big question, what are the top issues for Latino voters right now? They are still those pocketbook issues. We're talking about inflation, jobs, the economy, housing, and that's true across all demographic groups, subgroups within this population. So that means that's the same for men, for women, for older voters, etc. But also, what about those key battleground states? You can actually see, if you look at those battleground states, that Harris is leading Trump among Latinos in all of them. And of course, guys, this matters because the number of Hispanic eligible voters in each of those states is actually larger than the margin of victory for either candidate back in 2020. So we spoke to Latino voters in some of those battleground states and in Florida to really hear what they had to say.
I'm more enthusiastic now about voting because it's a younger candidate for sure. Just seeing how excited people are. People are saying they're just as excited as when Obama was running in 2008.
I'm still about the same. Yeah, I wasn't going to vote for Biden no matter what. Just because of the economy and how bad things have gone.
When Trump was president, he terrified the immigrants, especially Hispanics. So now they were here, that's to do his work.
Latinos are putting an exclamation point on housing. I think that there is an opportunity here to reach out, certainly on economic issues, also on responses to gun violence, a more balanced and effective approach to immigration.
You heard that key word, opportunity. It's still early days. Some evidence that there's still room for persuasion among many Latino voters. More than half of those polled, 55%, say they still have not been contacted by either party.
Fascinating. So, Morgan, is there any sense, as you put this in some historical context, which is, yes, Kamala Harris is making up ground from where Joe Biden was, but as you said, it's not where Democrats have been typically in terms of their advantage among Latino voters. Is there any sense of why that has eroded a little bit this time around from years past?
Yeah, it's interesting. We haven't seen from the poll where and how that has eroded, but what we have seen is how different the population looks this time around. So two big takeaways for me. One, how young this population is. So, for example, about a quarter of this population will be voting for the first time ever in this election. But to your point, it also describes about, how they feel about immigration, which is something we always hear associated with Latino voters. When you actually look at the polls, it's fifth, like compared to gun and violence and crime. But there's this distinction, Willie, between, how people got here and what they do once they get here for a lot of voters. So only 24% of them say that they would actually support, for example, finishing the wall, but almost half want to see people protected from deportation if they've been here working in this country for many years. So So you're starting to see those nuances come out now in this most recent poll.
So interesting. A group of voters who could be decisive in this presidential election. NBC News correspondent, NBC News Daily anchor, Morgan Radford. Morgan, thank you so much. As always.